Land acknowledgement. As we gather together, we acknowledge the sacred land on which we reside. It has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, this gathering place is still the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive to make right with all our relations. Last but certainly not least, we acknowledge the people of African descent who were brought here against their own will or in search of a safe place to live their lives and raise their children. Reconnaissance des terres. En nous rassemblant, nous reconnaissons la terre sacrée sur laquelle nous résidons. C'est un site d'activité humaine depuis 15 000 ans. Cette terre est le territoire des Premières Nations, Huron-Wendat et Petun, les Scéniques et plus récemment les Mississaugas de la rivière Crédit. Le territoire était sujet de l'alliance de la ceinture Wampum plat avec cuillère, un accord entre la Confédération Iroquois et Confédération des Ojibwe et des nations alliées à partager et à prendre soin pacifiquement pour les ressources autour des Grands Lacs. Aujourd'hui, ce lieu de rassemblement est toujours le foyer de nombreux peuples autochtones de toute l'île de la Tortue et nous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir la possibilité de travailler dans la communauté sur ce territoire. Nous sommes également conscients des alliances brisées et de la nécessité de nous efforcer de guérir toutes nos relations. Dernier point, mais non le moindre, nous remercions les personnes d'ascendance africaine qui ont été amenées ici contre leur volonté ou à la recherche d'un endroit sûr où vivre leur vie et élever leurs enfants.
This webinar provides illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Black Business and Professional Association. The BBPA makes no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein, and especially disclaim all liability for any damages arising out of the use or reference to or lines on such material.
Well, welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I see many faces out there, and I appreciate you being here. Pleasant afternoon to you all. For our new visitors and our longtime members, it's always good to see you. We appreciate you coming today and invite you to sit back and participate as we learn, as we share with today's discussion. I'm your host, Anton James. I'm a marketing and strategy consultant and an event host and moderator. 80%. This is the Ask the Professional series, brought to you by the Black Business Professional Association, or the BBPA, and is one of many programs which they launched to seek to understand, respond, and provide services and resources to support our community. This program is an interactive discussion-based series where we come together and discuss topics affecting our community. Topics that range from improving yourself, your business, your family. Issues with industry, community, work, equity, diversity and inclusion, shadism, and Black hair. Celebrations, award winners, historic and current community leaders. Regardless of the topic, the goal is the same: to provide an inviting platform where we as a community can come together and have candid conversations on issues that matter to us. So with that said, let's get into today's topic. It's a discussion on mental health specifically access, inclusion, and navigation. But before we get started, I would like to invite Mrs. Fran Desal, the Executive Director of the BBPA, to come and give us a few greetings. Miss Fran. Oh, you're muted, Fran.
Thank you, Anton, and welcome to our viewership again to this week's Ask a Professional. I met Colleen we sat on a panel together, and I was fascinated, intrigued, captivated by what she had to say. And I thought we need to get her on Ask a Professional. So Colleen, your topic is so important to us, especially in light, not only as a Black community, but we're coming out of the COVID issue. We have issues that we face as a community. I look forward to the next hour. I don't want to take any more time speaking and filling air because you have so much to say. Welcome into the BBPA family, and we hope to see more of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fran. Well, with that, special greetings. Let's move to our special guest of today, Miss Colleen Taffe. Well, who is Miss Colleen Taffe? Well, bridging the gaps between divergent approaches to care in medicine, religion, and social support communities, Colleen Taffe wears the hats of a playwright, an access and inclusion consultant, mental health professional, social advocate, and faith worker. Born in Jamaica and raised in Brooklyn and Toronto, Colleen's work centers around building holistic and experiential pathways to health and wellness for people and communities who are not getting the care and support they need. Colleen's creative, professional, and personal life are deeply infused with a mixture of humor, hope, and a splash of realism. She is the author of children's books, 8 plays, and directed and acted in many more. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you today to Miss Colleen Taffe.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction.
No worries.
What a great bio, but I wrote it, so I shouldn't say.
It's okay. You know what? It's all right. It's all right to be humble, but your background, it is amazing. And I'm looking forward to let everybody know about who you are. And so with that, let's jump into it. So today we're talking about mental health. We talked about access, inclusion, and navigation. How did you get involved? How are you personally get involved with mental health arena?
Great question. And so I tell people of this journey that I've been on. You know, I don't think that I got involved intentionally. I think mental health sought me out after getting an undergrad degree in history and African studies at York University, and being young and proud and really wanting to do things. I had a great stay in Ghana. I spent a year in West Africa, came back on this journey, angry, a little bit angry, I must say, a little bit confused, involved in substances, really lived the life of not knowing where I wanted to go. But one thing that always stood with me was the ability to act, the ability to engage audiences. And so coming back from Ghana in West Africa was such a life-changing experience that I began to take my future a little bit more seriously and started to train. I really just started to become a facilitator, which is my first passion. Anything with an audience, don't give me a mic, I will run away with it. And so I got involved that way. I became a trainer, and eventually the folks that I was working with, I began to, you know, figure out that there was more that I can do, and just kind of fell into mental health. I started working at the Canadian Mental Health Association in Peel, and there was my career. I won't say how long ago it was, but it was quite some time.
All right, so that's actually interesting. So tell us a little bit more about that. How has mental health impacted your life?
Yeah, it's one of these things where I'm almost driving backwards through my life. I think like most of us do, we put on these jackets, we put on these coats, especially being a young Black woman. I entered in looking for safety. And so you're asking me how they intersect, right? How the two come together. sorry, I don't want to lose my train of thought there. So I entered in, how do they intersect? Well, one thing that I know is when I was struggling with my identity, my Blackness was something that was really in the forefront. Always having to in Jamaica, we say, small up yourself, right? Always conscious that I spoke a little louder, that I thought a little different. And so I was always hyper vigilant. I got into some substances, and that also exacerbated my awareness, this kinds of stuff that were happening in my brain. I had some traumas, some experiences in life that really caused me to be unhappy. And so studying African studies and then falling into the world of mental health, it was many, many years later that I realized how the two kind of influence each other. You know, for us in the community, we carry a lot of baggage. We carry a lot of stuff. And when I say baggage, I don't mean that as negative. I mean, we carry a historical legacy that we enter into rooms with. You know, we enter into places of our workplace and our family and our churches, knowing that we have this extra thing about us. And so when I look at the world of mental health, that's how a lot of my clients enter in. They enter into their environments knowing, okay, should I bring all of me? You know, does everyone need to know that I'm struggling with anxiety? Does everyone need to know that I'm hearing voices? Does everyone need to know that I'm a little depressed or I'm a little bit hyper today? And I find that that's the thing about being Black. We enter into rooms, assessing the room really quickly and trying to figure out how much of myself do I bring into this room. And that's what I find with a lot of my clients that I work with, Black, white, green, or purple. They're constantly assessing the room to figure out, do I belong? And it's a thing that we in the community, we constantly do. I should say, I constantly do, trying to figure out, trying to really assess quickly, do I belong here? And so I find with the legacy of racism, we couldn't have been through what we've been through and not come out a little bit depressed or a little angry or a little determined. All of those things wrap up in who we are. And so it is a great intersection between racism and mental health, right? Not that we all have mental health challenges, right?
Right.
And where you are on the continuum really depends, but it is ingrained. The two go hand in hand often.
That's actually interesting. I want to dive deeper into that, but you mentioned something a second ago. You talked about the challenges. What has been your biggest challenges in this pathway before we get into the inclusion side?
Yeah, my biggest pathway, I think I've just described it, is walking. You know, my name is Colleen Taffe, and I love it. Thank God for my Jamaican parents, right? A very generic name. And so oftentimes my biggest challenge has been people questioning my authority, questioning my education, questioning whether or not I have a seat at the table. You know, sometimes, oftentimes I find that for myself, I question who I am. I question whether or not I have a seat at the table. I question, do I belong here? And so my biggest challenge in the beginning was questioning who I was. Do I really fit in? Then as I've matured and gone on, my biggest challenge has been, where does my faith, you know, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, where does my faith line up with the medical system? Where does my racism line up, not my racism, where does my own beliefs line up in a system that has traditionally excluded people who look like me? And working in, studying in African studies, it was almost like I was going against everything that I believed. I was against the system. I was against this form of colonialism that existed, that we are birthed into. And so now working within the system, sometimes it can be a push and pull within myself. And I find that oftentimes when we're talking about mental health, it is a push and pull within ourselves. So sometimes my biggest challenge, my biggest stumbling blocks is myself and my belief and my values and society and all of those expectations that come when I enter into the hospital and people give a double take. What do you like? What can I see your, we wear badges, and I find people are always trying to peep to see what my title is, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh, I see you looking. I know you're looking. So that's probably some of my biggest challenges.
You know, that's actually interesting. I don't think it's unique though. I think it's probably more common than one might think, particularly within our community. But let me quickly pivot to a question that Victoria asked. How do you decide to be a professional mental health associate?
Yeah, like I said, it found me. And this is one of the things that I have a very good friend of mine who coined this. And she says, purpose is a painkiller. And when I discovered my purpose, when I understood that I was called to these people, and I hate saying these people because they're not separate, we are the people. When I was called to this particular field, I realized how well I related to them. I realized how comfortable I am in sitting with someone who's struggling with bipolar, who's struggling with substance uses, who's struggling with trauma. There was a comfort and an ease. And in the process of that, Anton, I actually did some personal healing on my journey. You know what I mean? So a lot of us get into work for all kinds of reasons, but that personal healing that happened in the midst of my 20 years of working in mental health has been, you know, that saying, priceless. This is something that they didn't pay me. They can't pay me enough to have really had that personal healing that has happened within.
Well, yeah, well, it says that your gifts will make room for you, and clearly it has.
It has.
All right, so let's take right here. Let's pivot a little bit. Mm-hmm. You talked about inclusion. So you start off and say mental health access, inclusion, and navigation. Help us to understand, what do you specifically mean when you talk about inclusion as relates to mental health? What do you mean?
So that word inclusion, it's got so many different layers. Number one, folks with mental health, you know, we know that there's 1 in 4, 1 in 5 who will struggle worldwide, right? So this isn't a Canadian statistic. This isn't a Brampton statistic. This is worldwide, no matter where you go, right? Because sometimes in the Caribbean, we're here, and I'm a Jamaican by heart, right? And so sometimes we say, no, that doesn't happen. No, we bear it. No, it doesn't matter where you're from. It's 1 in 5 of community members. And so when I say inclusion, I'm talking about including that 1 in 5, because sometimes when you bring all of yourself into the room, people take a step back. I work in mental health, and I know if one day I showed up at the office saying, man, today my Prozac, it's just not working for me. Today, you know, I'm just feeling a little suicidal. I wonder what kind of impact that would have at the office. But yet it's okay for me to say, you know what, my sugar levels are a little bit off today. My diabetes is making me tired, or whatever the case is. I can bring my physical self into the room, but sometimes as someone who's dealing with mental health, I get excluded. And so I find, that a lot of my clients, they don't want to have that conversation. They call me and say, how do I tell my employer? How do I tell my boss? I don't want to go to get EAP services, because they'll know that I'm depressed, as if this is the big, dirty secret that no one wants to talk about. Yet we know, if we just look at Canada, we know that more people are off because of depression in the workplace than any other illness out there. And now when we layer COVID on top of that, the world is now seeing the impacts of mental health. You know, Anton, something that's funny, the people that I find struggling the most during this time are not my folks that I've been working with that know what it's like to be isolated. It's the rest of the world that have no clue what it's like to feel isolated and not be able to go out and be. And so I always say to my friends, welcome to my world. This is what a lot of our clients are struggling with every single day. And we're waiting. We can't wait for COVID it to be over. But the reality is, for some of the folks, that isolation will never end for them, even if they're in a room full of people. And so inclusion means that I can not only bring my mental health into the room, I can bring my Blackness into the room, I can bring my womanness into the room, I can bring my plus size self into the room, I can bring all of me into the room. We've got to be a more inclusive society, inclusive when it comes to mental health. And last point on that is, traditionally, we didn't have folks that look like yourself. I don't work with a lot of gentlemen that look like you. Why? Because somehow we feel that these people won't understand me. These people don't get me. And so I really want to tell folks out there that there's a lot of us who are working in mental health. We are faith believers. We are Black men and women. We are educated. We are not so educated. We are all shapes and sizes and colors. And so I want you, when you walk into a mental health, when you walk into a hospital, that you would see me, you would see someone that looks like yourself and feel included and welcomed to get services there. So that's part of the inclusion umbrella.
You know, you gave us a full, yeah, that's okay. That's okay though, because, you know, you hit on a few good points. And I think part of the challenge is, it is so true. You know, not every other, but most other medical conditions, you can be quickly identified. So here, and there's no shame to it. Why do you think there's such societal stigma on mental health, particularly within our community? Why do you think so?
Yeah, so I can think of a couple of reasons. So number one, you know, we came out of, at least us in the diaspora, right? Because this is very different. I've got I told you I was in Ghana, so I'm so attracted to the African way of doing things. So I'm really speaking to the diaspora. We grew up in this, we're birthed out of this legacy of slavery. And so during that time, it was buck up and shut up and get back on the field. Right? You didn't have time to be, the whole situation was a depression. And so I feel that we were just taught to just go through, push through, pull the plow, you know, if I can use that literal example, right? We were just pushing through no matter what. We were fighting for survival, to eat. And so sometimes mental health was not at the forefront. So oftentimes I feel like our community, at least our grandparents, my grandparents, my mother, we're like, what do you mean depression? We don't have time to be depressed. Come on, get back to work. So that's one reason why I think it's stigmatized. Then we look at our, the Black community. We're very much faith believers. Whether or not you go to church, listen, that's not my business. That's between you and God. But I know that there was somebody in your generation that went to church. You had a grandma that was all about Jesus, right? And so during the time of slavery, the church was instrumental to colonialize us, yes, but also to offer us freedom. And so we got into the church and we just wanted to cry out and say, we're overcomers, we can do this. And so the church also began to perpetuate this notion that, you know what, you just need Jesus and you can get strong. This is in fact true, but we know that what happens spiritually must come true in the natural. Yeah. So it's not enough to just say that we need Jesus. And we talked about this. If I needed a heart transplant, I wouldn't go to the altar and say, lay hands on me. I would say, yes, lay hands on me. Now let me go to the doctor and get my surgery, right? Well. So the church has also been guilty of that, but I don't blame them because we do best with what we know, right? And then we have this whole world that sees us as bionic men and women. They look at you, Anton, and they think, nah, that brother over there, he's strong. Oh, please. Because we have this erotic, masculine, like this, the way society looks at us through our body and our structure, and they think we can withstand anything. The reality is we did withstand anything. And so because of that, even in hospitals, even medications, they've been guilty of not giving us pain medications, of not giving us proper dosage, because for some reason we're stronger and we can get through it. And it's just layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of things that have happened that have caused stigma to happen in our community. The last point is this. Listen, I already come to the table at a disadvantage. Very earlier on, one of the first individuals that I heard say this was this. He said, Colleen, I am much more accepted as being a gangbanger, drug dealing, marijuana smoking man than I am a man with depression. I would much rather be an addict than I would be someone living with mental health, right? Because of the way society has seen traditionally the Black man and woman. And so stigma is just running rampant. We're guilty of perpetuating it. Society perpetuates it. Our sports and entertainment perpetuate it. This is the reality. And stigma just doesn't happen here. Mental health is a stigmatized part of our medical system, and we need to change that.
Wow, you are dead correct. I think a lot of people, part of the challenge is everyone's aware of it, but a lot of people didn't know the context, what was driving some of it.
Yeah.
They didn't recognize. But the truth be told, we're told we're exotic or we're told this. It's really because it's it's a reflection of what we've gone through, but it doesn't give us the aptitude or the latitude to discuss of our mental planes. It's a very interesting point. Let me ask you another question though. Mental health has many different facets, and it's a wide spectrum. Help us to understand in mental health challenges how it manifests themselves.
Yeah, so differently, right? As much as there's sand on the ground, is as much as different ways it can come about. So from my perspective, I am of the belief that mental health and addiction, there is a starting point called trauma. And I feel for a lot of our people, okay, trauma is the one thing that has caused their mental health to come alive or trigger their mental health. And so, sorry, things are popping up on my screen. So mental health and trauma. So this place of trauma. So if you think about us as a Black people, we come already, our glass of trauma is already half full, right? Because of our legacy, okay? And so I believe that trauma is the trigger, because you and I can have the exact same experience, but and live through the exact same trauma. But when we think about how we respond to the various things that are traumatic, you know that when you look at a family of children, some children are highly sensitive, some are quiet, like the family has so many different things. So we don't know exactly what is that we can experience the exact same trauma, but yet my mental health will be triggered and yours won't, right? Right. So there's so many signs and symptoms, and it's so individual. And this is the challenge. We cannot take one brush and paint the whole picture. We must explore it. I believe that we've got to teach people. I believe everyone has some sort of mental health challenge, right? It's whether or not it is clinical, okay, or is it adjustment? Right? Some of us go through mental health struggles. This challenge that we're in the pandemic, we've all felt a little depressed. We've all felt a little anxious, but the hope is that we will eventually come out of that, right? So depending on where you are on the continuum, mental health can impact you. So some of the signs and symptoms would be, when this pandemic is over, are you still feeling sad? Are you still feeling like you don't want to get out of bed? Are you still, here's something for you. I have so many people that I work with, and we go through a questionnaire, and I will ask somebody, are you having a hard time taking care of your personal hygiene? And it's like a light goes on. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. Some people, they don't even realize that today I didn't shower. Today I didn't brush my teeth. Today I didn't put on deodorant. Can be such a slow and subtle thing that happens to folks that they don't realize. Now, this is normal. On a Saturday, you know, I'm watching, I don't feel like doing much. I have a lazy Saturday. But I'm talking about when those things keep happening over and over again. And let me make a quick distinction for us folks out there, men and women in the Black community. My belief is that women, Black women, when they are struggling with their mental health, where do they show up? They show up at the doctor's office. They show up at the retail therapy. I show up at my best friend's house, one of them happens to be a nurse, the other one happens to be a psychotherapist. So that's great. I show up and I have conversation. Men who are struggling, Black men who are struggling with their mental health, Anton, where do you think they show up? Where are they? Yeah. They are the ones who are in the bars. Yeah, they're the ones who are drinking. They're in our jails. My God. They are running away. They're the ones who doesn't want to, who, you know, I can't live up to the expectation of being a father. And so I'm out, I'm running. Our Black men who are struggling with their mental health, they're on the run or they're being held behind bars. This is what I've seen, right? So there's a vast difference to know how we respond and when we need to get help. And so I am such a believer that just like I have a doctor that follows me all my life, I must have a mental health clinician, specialist, whatever you want to call us, that I can check in with time to time. And so a lot of the work that I do in the community is just really helping individuals. I know we're going to get to that, navigate to know when I got to step out and get help, because it's very complex, right? And so that's part of the work that I do. Go ahead.
No, that's really interesting. You dropped some really interesting nuggets there. First, it starts by trauma. You said, oh, there's always trauma there. And what's one thing we don't lack? We don't lack having trauma in our community at all. You talked about this slow degradation of, it's a process. It doesn't start one day, but small things start to add up. I think you're dead right. Women are socialized different. You're socialized to at least communicate with others, but us as men, we're not socialized that way. We're socialized to, you know, get up, you're fine. You know, that's really our issue. Now, we're seeing, when we're talking about trauma and some of the impacts, how does that manifest? Like we recently started off with the George Floyd, which really was the big explosion. How does racism and mental health interact? Because racism leads to a lot of the trauma that starts it for us. How do they interact?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? That's a loaded question. I think that when people are, so how do they interact? I think that when people are struggling with racism, it impacts us because sometimes it doesn't allow us to get help. We don't want to go and get help. Right? So we're struggling. We don't want to reach out. Okay. And trauma begets trauma. It starts to impact us. Yeah. Then we step out and we start doing things to help ease the pain. Right? We might step into substances, or we get angry, or it's like that pressure cooker that's there. Right? We bring who we are, all of the legacy of racism into the room. Sometimes, you know, and we talked about this the other day around that whole George Floyd situation that happened. And I was telling you that I have a very wise psychotherapist. If you ever want her as Ask the Professional, I would highly recommend this individual. She is phenomenal, not just because she's a personal friend, but she helps me work stuff out. And so one of the things that Lady Bowea said to me when this was all happening with George Floyd, she said, I know it can feel like we don't have anything, we can't do anything about it, because the systematic racism that happens on a bigger picture, sometimes we feel helpless, right? But she said, let's bring it down to this level. What can I do to help individuals? Because no matter if you were clinically depressed or not, when that situation happened, a lot of impact for us as a community. Some of us, I went in personally, I was silent. I was just quiet, right? Some people were, you know, waving the Black Lives Matter, whatever you had to do to manage. But what she said to me was, if we think about this and bring it down to our community level, and she said, how many times as a Black woman have you stepped on the neck of a Black man?
Mercy.
Maybe not physically, But how many times have I been like, don't talk to me, I'm gonna go get a job? How many times have we killed the voice of a Black man? So if I'm doing that at home, and then he steps out of the home, and now the police are saying your voice doesn't matter. I enter into the office and now they say your voice doesn't matter, or I have to control the voice that I do. Or maybe I'm now in a place of financial security and I'm driving, I don't know, a beautiful car or whatever. And now they say, well, you must have got that illegally or whatever. And now my voice doesn't matter. These things impact us. These things impact what's happening for us. And so it's eventually what happens in the mind, what we think about ourselves, our identity, who we are. This is a lot of the struggles that our clients are going with. They have this internal conflict that's happening within. And so when we layer on racism to that, my goodness, it can cause us to explode, or it can cause us to just sit back and bury ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Just lie down and die, because what's the point, you know? So hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, you did. You definitely gave some colorful insight there that kind of really makes it confronted in a different perspective. Before I go to the next question, Victoria had a question for you.
Okay.
And it was, what age group do you work with as a mental health associate?
Oh, are you asking at work or in life? So at work, where I work out of one of the hospitals. And so our program is for 16 and older. However, I also have a passion for young children. I think you mentioned my children's book. And so what I've learned in this mental health world that I'm in, one of the very most important thing that we can do is early intervention. Much like with your physical health, if I can get to some things and control my pre-diabetes, it won't lead me to actually needing insulin, right? And so it's the same thing. So my passion has been to work with the young people, the young children, working with parents to inform them on how to get how to get their children to have a healthier mental health. And so I love to say I work from 0 to 99, right? Because I think that mental health can impact everyone. Now you'll get some clinicians who are better at one thing and not the other, but my faith, I can say the Holy Spirit teaches me that I can be all things to all men. You got it. You say it.
All things.
You got it, right? So I try to work with just about everyone, and my business is expanding. So if it's not me personal, it's somebody else.
Thank you so much for that. Now, we've talked about a few challenges, and there's quite a few within our community itself. But is there any areas which you feel we can celebrate about mental health?
Of course. Oh my goodness, we totally need to celebrate that. And thank you for bringing that up. Because what we don't realize is there are so many successful stories. There's so many victories that we can hang on. There's so many people who, in spite of the struggle, in spite of their voices that they hear, in spite of feeling a little mood disorder, in spite of anxiety and substance use, there are tons of success stories. I believe myself to be a success story. I think we should just say Black people are successful, full stop.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? We've lived, what have we lived through? My goodness, we are overcomers. We are resilient. We are the ones who have done some phenomenal things in the world.
Go ahead.
I love how these athletes are now coming out to say, hey, I struggle. And we're like, what? How do you struggle and maintain success? Yeah, we know how to do it. We are a people that are so, I think success is something that is just breath, like the breath of God. That is something that we are success. We are success. And sometimes we might get a little derailed, but I love celebrating my Black people.
Well,
Yeah. I will, and people always saying, Colleen, you can't just go up to strange men and saying, dude, I love you. It's not appropriate at some time.
that's okay. That's okay. We love y'all too, man. It's okay.
We love it. We love each other. And so, yes, there are success stories. And I want you to know there are successful psychiatrists. There are successful nurses and doctors. There are successful people in every area of our field, right? And so people are doing successful things all over. You just hit me up if you want to know some stories. I can send you directly to people who might tell you about how they are overcomers and they're able to still continue even having, I call it the Paul effect. Remember how Paul in the Word had the limp or the hip challenge and the Lord didn't heal him. He didn't heal him. What he taught him to do is how to respond with it. Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, we're learning, we are the kings and queens of how to respond with what we're given. We will take a muck and spit it out to you and you're like, what? Like, look at that, right? So there are tons of success stories out there. So many, too many to count.
Love it, love it. For those that joined late, I just want to catch up to speed real quick. We're speaking with Colleen Taffe as we explore mental health, access, inclusion, and navigation. For those who came also late, you will also be able to see this show again on our YouTube channel, but we'll get to a little bit more of that later on. And from a navigation perspective, if you have any questions and you want to enjoy this conversation, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a chat functionality. And in there, you can either type in your question yourself, or raise your hands to ask any questions. With that, let's jump back into it. And let's talk and pivot now, because we talked about who you were. We talked about the inclusion side. We talked about access, but let's really get and talk about navigation. The challenge being is, but before you can really navigate, you really need to identify. So can you share some possible signs of someone to understand if their loved one may need some professional help? You made reference to one earlier on, small, that people wouldn't even think about. Are you having challenge with hygiene? But is there any other ones that you can share with us today?
Absolutely. Oftentimes eating. So people eating too much or too little. Sleep is another big one. Too much or too little. What else would I say? I would say feeling depressed for long periods of time, or what we call cycle. So, 2 weeks I'm up, 2 weeks I'm down, 2 weeks I'm up, 2 weeks I'm down, right? So seeing their emotions cycle through, sorry, oh my goodness. Or seeing, so what else am I thinking about? Having intrusive thoughts, constantly negative thoughts, maybe even thinking about suicide, feeling hopeless, despair. These things that persist in our life. It's one thing to feel sad over a period of time. That's how we're created. We can't always ride the mountaintop. We've got to come down, right? But it's when it's happening over long periods of time. And the other thing that I tell folks, pay attention to friends and family around you, because oftentimes I'm the last one to see what kind of state I'm in. But if friends, and truth is consistent, and so if friends and family start identifying things and saying, hey, Colleen, you just don't seem like yourself. I want to check in with that. I want to check in with that and see how that is. So those are some of the things that I would say. Oftentimes risky behaviors, confused thinking, right? Sometimes people just find that, oh my goodness, how did I get to this spot? Right? Where did I come from? What happened? I find sometimes people are, you might notice on social media that all of a sudden they sound a little bit off, right? So these are some of the things that you can watch for when it comes to a breakdown of your mental health.
Okay, and so if signs are seen, or someone even for a loved one or for themselves, what type of support is available?
Yeah, so that's the challenge. Canada, we are not short of support, okay? It's whether or not it's effective support. It's whether or not it's support that will speak to the individual. So I always encourage people to get connected to someone. Again, this navigation piece is so key, because for some people, the support might come from the church, and that's okay. For other people, support might come from medication, and that's okay. For other people, support might come from exercise or proper dieting, and that's okay. So what you want to do is sit down with someone so that you can kind of draw up, not kind of, but draw up a plan on how to manage the symptoms that you're having. And one of the things that I know that parents and family members, spouses always come to me and say is, Colleen, how can I get that person to understand? How can I get them to the hospital? How can I get them? I don't have an answer for that, because in this Canada, it has to be volunteer.
Hold on, before you get there, because
okay.
I want to get there. I want to get it with you. But before you do, you talked about when the type of support and is arranged them, but where do you find the biggest gap in support? Because I'm coming to your question next. Don't worry about that.
We find the biggest gap. So what's happened is, Canada is so great because we have this OHIP system, right? That helps us get services. But the OHIP system is not built to withstand ongoing service. So I find within the mental health, people get help, but it's short term. It's very quick. It's 6 weeks, it's 8 weeks. And so people haven't experienced their full healing or their full ability to get back to a functioning state. So I find the biggest challenge is we just don't have enough long-term supports that can really support people on their journey, right? We also don't have enough, right? Because there's so many people who are struggling. Our services are very, very limited, right? So there's not enough. If we talk about 1 in 4, I live in Brampton and we only have one hospital here. Well, if 1 in 4 of us showed up at the hospital in Brampton,
mercy. Mercy.
Right? It would be devastating. So I think oftentimes because of the not enough, and I don't know how much is enough, right? But what I think is we have done a disservice. We've got to start teaching people not to rely on the system. We've got to start empowering people to pull out their own resources from within. So stop giving Band-Aid solutions and start looking, how can I work with you to let you feel confident enough that when things hit you, when that slope of depression comes your way, you are able to get tools in your hand to manage and overcome them. Right? I find sometimes we've taught people to become a little bit too dependent on the system. People bring me their young people and say, fix them. And I'm like, excuse you? I get this person for 1 hour. You get them 24 hours, 7 days a week. I can't fix them. But what I can do is help you learn some tools so that you guys can all work together. It is a process, though. It's not instantaneous, and we've got to understand that, right?
Okay, you know what? And I appreciate that feedback. And now I want to pivot to what you were going before. When you break down, because we don't want the Band-Aid, but we want them to get help. But what most people don't know, help us to break down a little bit more, help us understand the challenges of current care. What are those challenges that you access it or delivering it? What are they?
There's so many challenges. First of all, we have this confidentiality, right? That we can't, as a loved one, I can't go and say, hey, this person is struggling, get them help, because the person has to be volunteer, right? It has to be voluntary. That is one way, right? Is that I volunteer myself to get help. The other 2 ways are if someone is really not able to care, if they're a danger to themselves or others, then we can what we call form them, meaning their doctor can actually tell them that they must go to hospital. And so we bring them into the hospital and we hold them for a certain period of time for observation, right? That's the other way. And usually when people are formed, it's usually by a doctor or by police officers who brought the individual to ER because they're unable to take care of themselves. Maybe they're suicidal or whatever the case is. The other way is if a family member goes to the justice of peace with enough evidence to say, you know what, this is what's happening to Colleen, and it would be in her best interest if Colleen was held in hospital for observation. That can be a very traumatic thing for family, a very traumatic thing for the person. And oftentimes you need a lot of evidence for that judge to actually issue a form to get that person picked out. So those are some ways that we can get people to hospital. But I'll tell you, that is my number one conversation that I have. How can I help the person? And so if this was a workshop that I was doing, this is what I would say. And I'm going to throw it out there to everyone. I want you to think of a way or think of something that you have had to recover from. It could be a divorce. It could be an illness. It could be bankruptcy. It could be stop smoking, right? Think of something that you have had to recover from. Now I want you to think, number one, what did I need from myself to recover? And number two, what did I need from loved ones to recover? If we were in person, I would be taking all answers from people. When I do this exercise, people always say things like, I needed patience and time. Oh, I needed someone to bring me a hot meal. You know what? I needed someone to come and help me clean up my house. I needed someone to listen to me. I needed a hug. They say all of these things that don't include medical solutions. And so this is what I say to family members and loved ones. The best thing that you can do to help that person is to support them, is to love them, is to give them your time. And I know it's not easy. You yourself have to get some self-care as well, right? But what the best thing people need to recover from is us being present in the room. Oftentimes, I'm not bringing solution to people. I'm just there eye to eye to them to hear what they have to say. I call it the throwing up phase. They throw up on me every day, and I sit in the middle of someone throwing up, getting rid of all of the things that are really devastating to them. People, I find, they don't need to know when to take medications. Okay, yeah, sometimes. I don't need you to tell me I need a doctor. I don't need some of the medical things that you're telling me. What I need is your time, your commitment, your patience, and your ability to be connected to me. Because in the world that we live in right now, human contact has been taken away from us. And I can go into a Bible verse right now and preach that word.
Well,
the human contact is what we're missing. The social, the phone, the this, the that has prevented us from having face-to-face conversation. There's a reason why we were born attached to the umbilical cord of our mothers, because there's an attachment that we must have with each other. We must connect with each other in order to survive with each other. And so I always encourage people, connect, reach out, call people, pick up the phone, go and see them. I know we're in times of COVID, but go and see people. You don't have to have the solution. You just have to be willing to have the time to sit with someone and say, yeah, it sucks. And you know what, Colleen, I don't even know what to say, but I want you to know, I'm just going to sit here with you in silence, and that's okay. Try that on for size and see how that happens. Stop giving advice. Stop saying, well, if I were you, you just need to buck up and no, just be quiet and say to the person, what do you need? What do you need from me? How can I help you today? I don't have the solution for your life, for your crisis, for what's going on for you. I just want to be present enough so that you can tell me. And if you don't know what you need, that's okay. I'm going to sit in silence with you until we figure it out together.
You said something that was very hot there, and I think that needs to be spoken out more. That is, we don't necessarily have to have the answer, just let them know, I need you to survive. That song was such a fitting song for right here, that we need you to survive. I think you hit it dead on right here. I'm going to ask, because you know what? Let's talk what the next stage of that is. So you've identified you don't have to solve the problem. You have to be there. But what does recovery look like? Is there recovery? And if so, what does it look like? We don't have much time. So we have about 3 minutes left.
Jeez, it's such a tough question. Recovery for everyone is different. Okay. For some people, recovery is I'm taking my medication and I'm functioning well. For some people, for them, recovery means I'll never need medication again. For some people, recovery means I'm going to accept who I am, and that's just who. Recovery means different things for different people. So we've got to identify what is your version of recovery. I'll give you a quick insight to my own life. I struggle with type 2 diabetes. One day I was sitting at my doctor's, in her office, and I said, "Oh, doctor, I can't wait until I don't need medication and I can recover." And she goes, "But I don't understand, Colleen. Your medication is keeping your sugar levels down. Your medication is helping you not feel tired and exhausted. How come you don't see that as your recovery?" And I was like, duh. Sometimes God or people, they give us different tools. What'll work for your recovery may not work for mine. And that's why we got to stop preaching to people to say, this is what I did. Well, good for you that that's what worked for you. It may not work for me. So I'm going to give you the space to tell me, what does your recovery look like? Some of the people that I work with addictions, their recovery is, I want to know how I can drink every day and be okay with that. And I'm like, all right. Some people say, I never want to drink again. All right. What does recovery look like? And how can I help you take the steps to get on that recovery journey? And recovery is not a final destination. It is a journey.
All right.
A journey of ups and downs and leaps and bounds. And that's okay. That's okay, because we are a community of survivors. And so in this Black community, if any community should be welcoming of mental health, it's the Black community. Because we
fall down, but we get up. We get up. Go ahead with yourself.
We live it. We've been there. And so we've got to be more inclusive to help individuals on their journey of recovery. As my friend Lady Boea says, one day at a time, it is possible. It is possible.
Live good and walk long. We love it. All right. Last question. We have 2 minutes. The last question to you. Where can someone access information, learn more in supporting someone that struggles with mental health challenges, and or if you have additional information, where do they access information?
Yeah, I think that's a great place. Try to go somewhere reputable. So in almost every community, there's the Canadian Mental Health Association. And so I always say, go to them, because they will be a great starting point for you. There's places, if you need to go to hospital, go to ER. Don't wait, don't delay. The quicker you get help, the better. You can, I'm not, if you know anything about, I'm not about self-promotion. I certainly am not. But if you wanted to reach out to me, I can help.
Wait a second. Well, let me stop.
I know.
You gave us an hour of full talk and you don't want to tell who you are? Listen, let me ask you specifically, so I'll ask, you want to be humble. How do they get a hold of you?
Thank you so much. So you can connect with me. I have a website, taffconsulting.com, or you can email me, info@taffconsulting.com. I'm the worst at this. You can email me. Listen, what I tell folks is the navigation part for me is so easy. You can call me, Anton. We can have a one-on-one together via Zoom or over coffee, and I can just point you in the right direction. It doesn't have to be me. I think some of us from our community, we're used to carrying the load. I'm like, I'm going to distribute it. Ooh, go over there. So I can at least get you in the right direction. I love that part of my work, is being able to help individuals coordinate some services. We've got some great organizations. I think of Roots Community Service. I think of Across Boundaries in Toronto. We've got some great services that speak to us. I see my friend Cleone on the line. She's got a great peer mentor group called Resilient Minds. There's all kinds of things out there. And so connect with me if you want to find out where you can get help. If I don't know, my job is to find out for you, right? So there is information. We just got to know. I'm like Google. type it in and I'll spit out an answer for you.
Colleen, we thank you so much. You shared a wealth of information today, and you gave some interesting perspective that we oftentimes don't even realize and don't even simple. It can be as simple as just being there.
Yeah.
With that said, let's be there for each other. For those that joined late today, I want to welcome you to go on to the BBPA's YouTube site. You can actually get a copy of this going on. On the screen right now, you're going to see some of the programs that's going to be coming up next week. And you will see that we have the Ask Professional series next Wednesday at 12 o'clock, the competitive advantage of being likable and charismatic. That will be next Wednesday. There will also be a BAIDS program tomorrow. The National Scholarship Program at Town Hall, Wednesday, June 30th at 2021. Fabulous. There will also be, and this is you're seeing next, is the financial literacy program for the Black youth and young adults at Saturday morning at 10 to 11:30. Phenomenal program. And the BAIDS program again.
Oh, these are great. My goodness.
Now, the other two programs which we need to talk about is next Tuesday. We will have one at 2 o'clock, which is called the Level Up program. It's a masterclass for Black-led, masterclass for funding and financing, masterclass for Black-led businesses. At 6 o'clock, there's also Boss Woman, which is a Black entrepreneurial woman program for next Tuesday. So at Tuesday, it's at 2 o'clock, and we also have one at 6 o'clock. For all those that came and joined us today, we thank you so much. We ask you to continue to come on and support us as we look to support you and the community as we grow together. We look forward. We thank our special guest, Colleen Taffe, for sharing such wealth of information. I would be remiss if I at least didn't give our executive director again a word to say, a quick word of goodbye on behalf of the BBPA.
I just thanks, Anton. I just want to say to Colleen that you'll be back. The 1 hour wasn't enough. I feel like you've given us the best lunch ever. I don't need to go have lunch. This was worth it. But we will have you back because this subject is so critical to our community. And I know you had to rush through everything you were saying. So we're going to, I'll give you a call, we'll send an email, and we'll talk about connecting and having a continuation of this discussion. Thank you very much. You met all the expectations I had.
Thank you. And I just want to, Anton, I just want to encourage you. I feel like I want to just take your voice and your face and just run it through the banners, because we don't recognize our articulate brothers who are doing something for our community. We're very quick to step on the neck. But today I want to applaud you and all the brothers who might be on the line and say thank you for doing the work that you do with such passion and articulation. It's quite warming for my heart. I don't know you, but I'm so proud of you. All right, I'm so proud of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I thank you on behalf of myself and all the other, because you're absolutely right. Oftentimes we are, for us Black males, sometimes you hear all the negative, but you don't hear the positive. So I definitely appreciate that. Yeah. And for all the rest that are on the line, thank you for coming out and supporting. You know, this is exactly it. This is what the purpose of this program is to connect, understand, discuss the issues that matter to us all. Because the reality is, even though not every issue we discuss might relate to you, you know someone, you have a loved someone, and it's giving you tools to help those that are around. So we thank you again. Please continue to stay tuned as we go forward. For those, have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Good work, Anton, as per usual.
Thank you, Mr. Pinnock.
And I can see that you got into the mental health of Colleen. So she's in a better place right now.
Yes.
All good, it's all good.
For those who do not recognize that voice, that's the one and that's the only Mr. Michael Pinnock. He is the treasurer of the BBPA. He's the one that drops the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, the beautiful questions on a weekly basis. Mr. Michael Pinnock, that is it.
Thank you.
Now, again, for anyone that joined late today, if you want to see this session or any other of the previous sessions, BBPA has a YouTube channel that has many of our shows. And again, share this with our community. I think this particular one is so relevant You heard that 1 in 4. 1 in 4 worldwide. And I'm going to say, based upon my engagement, that doesn't reflect my community, the community that I know, the circle. So there's so many people that are suffering in silence. And if this can give them one nugget that they can help someone in their family, in their friends, in their sphere of influence, it's so worth it. So please go to the YouTube channel, the BBPA YouTube channel. And if you haven't, if you came on late, you can see it there, and you can also share it with those around. Sharing is caring, knowledge is power, and we're here to do it together. All with that blessing.